This is Ahead in Tech with me, your host, Sanjay Puswani. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Nikita Rajput from the good old US of A. Nikita, hello, how are you?
Hi, Sanj. Thank you so much for having me on this show. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. It's my pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for joining me. So, Nikita, a brief introduction to yourself. You're fairly early in your career, and you're pretty young, but we won't hold that against you. Despite that, you've done a lot of interesting things in your career. You're a grad from Georgia Institute of Technology. You've had a lot of cool internships at companies like Grubhub, Home Depot, Intel, and Salesforce, and you're now a full-time software engineer, a full-stack software engineer over at Salesforce. You've had a lot of involvement in the past with women in tech initiatives, and you are yourself, of course, a woman in tech, and you run a pretty interesting podcast yourself as well. So we're going to discuss all of those things today.
Thank you. That sounds great. Yeah, I'm excited to dive deep into that.
Does it sometimes, when you hear it back, does it kind of take you aback? All the things you've done?
It really does. It's funny for you to kind of put in that frame in that context because I feel like there's a long way to go, a lot of milestones still yet to be hit. But I'm happy to definitely reflect on this journey. And what's been interesting is through the lockdowns, the quarantines, it's given me some time to really think about my past and where to go from here. So thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to be chatting with you on that.
Awesome. Great. And I agree. I mean, this will be helpful to people who are just slightly behind you, following in your footsteps, and also people like myself who are much, ahead of you, and also like probably 2 generations older than you, to sort of see how all the bright young upstarts are doing, in our industry.
Yep. Sounds great.
So cool. So let's start from the beginning. Tell me about some of your internships. I mean, how do they happen? And then what are they like? Because, obviously I'm from the British system, you're from the American system. So this will be very interesting to hear your perspective. I'm not really sure how things work out there.
So I guess I can go a little bit back to think about my journey in technology and how it all kind of really started. So, as an like my last year of high school is when you start applying to colleges, and nowhere did I even briefly think about computer science. Actually, it's the funny thing. My head was, deep in the sand with going in the medical field. I was applying as a biomedical engineer or as a biology major at some of the schools here in the U.S. And lo and behold, I got into Georgia Tech, and during the orientation session that we have, that's about a month out from the first day of school, first day of college, they show you the curriculum that you had, for me particular as a biomedical engineer. And none of this struck me as interesting. It was just, going over my head, and none of it was something that I, not even profoundly had any interest in. So, then I kind of went back to the drawing board there, and I was like, okay, I'm admitted to this great school, but what can I do that, sparks my interest and my passion for helping people? And, the answer to that was computer science. And I already had taken a few computer science courses in high school, and I was quite familiar with Java and Python. So it's kind of like a no-brainer to put the two together and, request my major be switched to computer science. So, right going to there, I think I was really surrounded by, amazing upperclassmen students and mentors who, they talked about their experiences with internships. And there was a large, community and push at Georgia Tech to speak to recruiters at different companies. We'd always have, in the lobby of the College of Computing, actually, we would have a company of the day almost, where either usually a lot of local companies based out in Atlanta, like State Farm or Chick-fil-A or Home Depot, they'd come out to the lobby, and they'd chat with the students. They'd have engineers working full time at those companies chat with the students, and through all those conversations, as well as career fairs, it was the whole internship experience or opportunity was very much encouraged, if not readily available. So I think that my environment had a lot to do with, getting those internships early on. But again, for some of the big fish companies that I really wanted to work at, they're always like, come back next year. You're just a freshman. And, that's when I was like, okay, well, maybe I should strive for something that's maybe a bit more local and also something that I have, a little bit more interest in. So that's where, I kind of got my first internship over at Ingenious Med. This was following my freshman year. And that was particularly interesting because it combined kind of the two fields that I saw myself in, technology and medicine or healthcare. So that was really special to me because not only, was I working at a company that maybe was a bit smaller, so I'd have a bit more familiarity with different folks in the company and the different organizations. But it was also just an awesome like internship program itself, that was like fairly rotational, and I got to kind of have a small taste of various things like integration, mobile technology integration, mobile app development, and doing some operational work as well, like as a technology like analyst, that type of work, data analyst as well. So I thought it was a well-rounded experience, that actual internship, and it just kind of opened the doors for a lot more opportunities. And I thought it was particularly special because it was almost like a startup uh, sized company, but it was, well established in like its tech stack. So I got to do things like iOS development and JavaScript development, that really, I think, set a solid foundation for not only like programming and technical skills, but also those interprofessional skills like soft skills, giving presentations. I think that's all, super critical to build as early as you can, is, what I've been able to pick up. So it was an awesome experience, and I highly encourage, anyone to have an internship no matter which company it's at. I think being able to interface with experienced developers or experienced people in the industry, that's going to give you probably way more faster set of skills and knowledge than, sitting in classes all day. So it's really special, I think, internships, because you get paid to learn. And I think
Mm.
that speaks for a lot of jobs, but I think for internships more, because you have that room to make mistakes and ask questions, and it's a really kind of special spot you can have to boost your career.
And now that you've kind of settled into your first role, it's very
Mhm.
early on, but looking back at those two experiences, your education and those internships, to what extent do both of those help prepare you?
I would say at the highest levels possible. I've just completed. Oh, actually, I have like. Okay, yeah, I just completed like 7 to 8 months in my full time position, and especially having a internship in the same company that I'm at right now, that also just incredibly accelerated my familiarity with like the tech stack and, business values and objectives, as well as just the company culture. So I thought that was, pretty special to have almost no need for a big transition from like interning to full time, because I stayed pretty much within the same company, but of course different part of the company. However, I would say, leading up to this point, those internships where I got to, have a taste in very different technology stacks and languages, but as well as, each company that I was at was solving a different problem. They were in a different space, been in retail, hardware, um, and healthcare. So they're all various companies. But I think what's really similar about all of them is the fact that they are using technology to solve problems, business problems. And I think that comes to, full circle at Salesforce, where I work at right now. And, they like to claim that business is the greatest platform for change. And that is kind of accelerated through technology. So I think when it comes to obviously the technical skills, but alongside with that, some of the more critical thinking and design type of skills, has also really been helpful to gain across those internship experiences and really put me in a position where I feel quite confident and I feel quite ready to take on and learn more and more every day.
And you're fairly international as well because you actually had a little stint in Shenzhen. Am I right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so that was actually a quite immersive program I had. Just to kind of give a little bit of context for that, during my time at Georgia Tech, I was part of a technology and management a minor program. It's the Denning Technology and Management. And it's an incredibly special program. If anyone listening to this is at Georgia Tech or is considering Georgia Tech as an undergraduate degree, I highly encourage you to apply and seek uh, that program, because what's really special is that it combines a lot of interdisciplinary majors, and we work together. We're sitting in classes like emerging technology, product design and development, and part of that includes this immersive program in Shenzhen. It was a global leadership certificate program, and what was really cool about that is we were able to actually work and interface with students at the university. So they have a completely different upbringing and background than us. But what was really special was that we were able to come together and talk about a case study that was either solved by like technology or certain business objectives and present that to our peers. So it's really special. I thought that, you might, this group of people is like halfway across the world from you, but you're still able to come together with your, experiences and your thinking skills and your speaking skills and have a very productive and viable conversation. To me, growing up like in the US, that was just very like profound experience, because I wouldn't have people all of different backgrounds growing up here. I stayed in the southern part of the US primarily my whole life. So it was just absolutely exhilarating and eye-opening to see that how much we have in similar across the globe and different. And that just comes down to like, not to make this super deep or anything, but human nature, we are more similar than different. So I had so many like amazing takeaways from that experience in Shenzhen. And it's a beautiful city with so much like vibrancy in the culture. And I honestly thought when it comes to technology, they're, miles ahead of what is here in the US. I thought it was just amazing and
Really?
brilliant to spend time there. Yeah. I would, I could, I would, as soon as things are okay again, I would love to go visit Hong Kong and Shenzhen.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that your first time out of the US?
It was actually my, I guess you can say, third time out of the
Hmm.
U.S.,
Hmm.
but definitely the most exciting time out of the U.S. for sure.
Mm.
Because I know some folks, when they're in university, they go to like a study abroad program that either occurs like during a semester or a summer. But I definitely wanted to spend my summers like interning. So this was a way for me to kind of get that experience abroad. Obviously, not as time consuming. Unfortunately, it was a very short trip, but I still had just amazing takeaways. And also, what was cool about that trip is we were able to speak with various companies like DJI and tour some of their offices and speak with the business representatives there. And they were talking about what they work on and all the different technologies that they're using in solving uh, consumer and business problems there. So that was also incredibly insightful.
Hey, you. Yeah, you watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Just wanted to say thank you. You're the reason I'm creating this content, and your opinion is really important to me, so I hope you're enjoying it. One of the best feelings is hearing from my audience, so please let me know what you like or don't like, or whatever else you want to say. You can leave a comment below, tweet me at aheadintech, or find lots of other ways to contact me on my site at aheadintech.com. You can also really help me grow by liking, sharing, and telling a friend. Thank you again, and back to the show. Tell me about your journey to your current full-time, full-stack software engineering role at Salesforce, because you did intern there before. So does that help? And what's the process like?
Absolutely. I would say, I think when it comes to, I guess, here in the US and for an undergrad who's in computer science looking for, immediately graduating, like having a full time job, more and more the trend that I'm seeing is that you really want your last internship, either, the one that, primarily the one that's in the summer before the year you plan to graduate. So typically that's the summer before like your senior last year. And that internship is probably the most important because the trend that I'm seeing, at least here in the US, is that companies would much rather hire the new entry level, new grad engineers from their intern class rather than recruiting openly all over again. And I'm definitely seeing that a bit more smaller companies. I would say less so of like companies like Google or Amazon, Facebook, of course, big tech, but definitely companies like Reddit, Salesforce, Slack, Pinterest, Twitter. I think those are the type of companies that really like to just pull interns from their intern class rather than spending resources to recruit for full time again. So that kind of does put a bit more pressure to perform and really stand up to the challenges that you're presented at your internship. But what it does is easily reward you with a full time offer at the end of the program. So I was very fortunate to have been in that position. The actual internship I had definitely set me up for success, especially when it comes to understanding how things work at the company, the business values, metrics, and of course, the company culture. I think has all really resonated with me when starting my full time job. And of course, I did openly recruit that fall of my senior year for positions, outside of Salesforce, at different companies. So I did have a variety of like options, and it was very interesting to go through that recruitment process at various companies. But I guess people say there's no place like home, and Salesforce really does feel like a great home base, and I can speak tons and tons about the culture at the company and why it really ultimately led that to be my decision of where to end up full time. But to speak a little bit about the process of like a full time gig entry level, you'd go through like a phone screening and several technical rounds, technical interviews, and then perhaps a hiring manager or behavioral interview. That's typically the route that I've seen.
Because you had already interned there, and like you mentioned before, with internships, you're a known quantity, so it's, I guess, easier for them to take you on, right? It's less of a
Right.
risk.
When it comes to like fulfilling positions in the company, I think what happens to be sometimes the case is if the team that you interned with has an opening for like a full-time entry level, then chances are you'd be matched with that team just because you're familiar with that team's workflow and of course the leadership on that team. But I think, yeah, it definitely is like a resourceful, maybe like HR approach to things that they have here at companies. And I just see it being more and more the case, as, opportunities in tech grow. They're kind of more focused on like the intern development and investing more in an intern individual and then ultimately shape them for success later on at the company. It's just a trend that I've been seeing.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an important thing. Everyone has to maintain healthy pipelines, right? And this is a fantastic way to do it.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more with that.
I'm curious, what are the key sort of standouts for you in terms of culture at Salesforce that really draws you to it? I'm fascinated that you called it home, because I think of some of my companies that I've worked for in the past the same way. I'm interested in your take on it.
I think just like almost day one walking into like Salesforce office as an intern, it was just very much surrounded by positive energy, positive outlooks on the business and technology, and always kind of centering, the core values of the company, which are like trust and equality at the forefront of everything that is practiced and preached there. So it was really refreshing to see that, a company really walk the talk, or I think that's the phrase to use. Um, Practice what they preach.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because as an intern, I never felt like I was an intern, aside from all the cool intern things like going on cool outings and stuff like that. But when it comes to like what I was doing, tech from a technical standpoint, or what kind of feedback or contributions I was able to give, it didn't really feel like I was being treated as an intern or given busy work. I think I was given definitely projects that are impactful and insightful for the business. Um, so that it was one thing, I guess, that really stood out to me was the fact that equality and individuals at the company were really encouraged to be allies and to be open minded. I thought that was really special because sometimes at work you're just kind of put into silos. But at Salesforce, I felt that it was really just kind of an open playground for you to interact and speak with others and work with others, as well as, take stances from like a personal development perspective where you could join and learn from groups, all sorts of people, veterans, people of color, females, people of different, even we have the like a excuse me, a Gen Force. Sorry, Gen Force
Okay.
is like a equality group at Salesforce, also known as employee resource groups at some other companies, where you would talk to folks of we celebrate all generations, all mindsets. I thought that was special because I know that some companies they have like an ageist problem, or like there's a
Mm.
big gap between different generations, but that was definitely like celebrated and encouraged to close that gap at Salesforce. So I thought that was really unique and reaching out across the aisle in ways that I've never seen before. So it was definitely refreshing, and that's why it kind of feels like home because it's a place where everyone is kind of welcomed and celebrated, and also the typical term that we call ourselves is ohana, which means family in Hawaiian. So that's kind of our culture.
That's great. Sounds fantastic. I'm very happy for you.
Thanks.
So tell me about some of your interests in terms of tech. I mean, you mentioned iOS dev and JavaScript. I think those are solid foundations. What sort of tech are you interested in working in?
Yeah, I think that I definitely agree with, like, the foundations when it comes to like web and mobile development. They're definitely there, and there's always frameworks and open source frameworks, especially coming out with like the next iteration of those things. But I think in like the long term, I'm definitely passionate and excited about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how those are slowly being integrated in pretty much every digital interaction we have these days. Things like natural language processing and image processing and even video processing. I think when it comes to kind of combining like usefulness and utility with that ease of AI, I think that's a very powerful combination, and it's definitely making the world a better place. Of course, there are caveats with that and dark side to AI and machine learning, of course. But when it comes to like the net overall impact, I think that there is more good in those technologies.
Where are you going? I mean, I know it's extremely early days for you. You've got to absorb a lot of information, but do you have like a North Star you're following? Do you have a career plan?
Yeah, I always kind of think about this quite often. Of course, definitely early on in my career, but that's where I really see like the world as my oyster. And when it comes to the future, I'm really kind of stuck between two main paths, which I feel like almost every, excuse me, entry level developer might be, leadership or technical, like being an architect or technically savvy. So I am interested in kind of exploring the more business cases, but simultaneously I'm also interested in exploring the almost greatest and latest technologies that will surface. So I think I've spoken to a lot of folks who really encourage like a startup or joining a startup or creating a startup and just having that entrepreneurship experience that you just learn a ton from, right? That you can't really necessarily get as a software engineer alone. When it comes to thinking about like revenue and business value, and of course, like the impact that a product can have on the world. I think those things are very important. So, while I don't necessarily know the finite answer to where I see myself, I definitely have a few like milestones I want to reach and experience that I think will ultimately guide me to where I see myself in the future. Of course, I'm very passionate about technologies that empower people all over the globe. And when I come to think of like some awesome stories of some awesome companies that have come out with solving an actual problem for people, I think of companies um, like Bumble, for example. It might sound very surface level, like when you look at what the company does, but when you look at like the impact and what it actually stands for, I think it's quite inspiring. And also companies that encourage health and technology, things like Fitbit. When it comes to like the actual mission vision of a company, I think that's where my passions really lie. And of course, Anchor, they're an awesome platform, an awesome company that I think is doing great things. So yeah, I think it's a really combination of finding that actual passion and problem here in this world that I think uh, I'm really excited to solve one day.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, you should definitely check out Enormous Issues, Audacious Ideas, a podcast from tech co-founder and friend of mine, Ria Naidu, on a mission to change the world by developing world-changing entrepreneurs. If you're interested in tech trends that are shifting the world as we know it and hearing from mission-driven leaders that are absolutely changing the game, go ahead and search for Enormous Issues, Audacious Ideas wherever you get your podcasts, or follow Ria on Instagram at Audacious Ideas. So now, of course, Salesforce is a West Coast US company, and you're currently in the East Coast. We are, of course, hopefully in the tail end of a global pandemic now, which is forcing people to work remotely. But how has this experience been for you?
So I consider myself still incredibly like lucky in this entire situation. What's been good is that I have an awesome team and company that supports work-life balance. So what's nice is that I tend to work like West Coast hours primarily, kind of like a fusion between the two. So what's nice is that I'll start later in the day, so I'll have my mornings free to do some basic morning routine stuff like workout and take care of like errands and things like that. So that's been really nice to have. And of course that does come with like ending late in the day though. So it's still I'm working around like creating that balance, but I think for the most part I've been more than okay with that. When it came to like working remotely, right, like the onboarding situation, there definitely are like pros and cons to doing that virtually. It's nice to do things like asynchronously. So what happened before with like sitting in like hours and hours of meetings of getting like your laptop set up, you can do it just now like watching a video or following a set of instructions. So I think honestly this pandemic has forced people to document things better, not just speaking like at Salesforce, but like overall in general. So I think that's been really nice, and it makes things a bit more accessible and on demand. So I think that's been super helpful. But of course, some of the I talked about this in like a podcast episode of mine called the Corona Commute. But when it comes to like picking up things subconsciously on the like at work in the office, like picking up things like conversations, what people are discussing and talking about, I think those things are like what's missed out on and can maybe fast track like your understanding of things. And of course, being able to just like turn around and ask someone a question that's like at the desk behind you versus now you have to like, chat with them and wait for their response and things like that. So there are pros and cons of it all, but I think the trend that I'm seeing at least is that remote work is the future. I think companies really understand that like you can give people the flexibility of like working at home and avoiding that, physical commute, which is, can definitely take a toll on people's like physical and mental selves. So there's something special about just waking up in your sweatpants and logging on to work. So, uh, there's some value when it comes to remote work, but I think it should come with a balance of, maybe interacting with people face to face every now and then.
That's a great point that you make. When I think back to my experiences in senior roles, you definitely have to keep one eye on the newer developers, make sure they have the work that they need and the support that they need, and they're growing and they're involved in things. And I remember when the lockdowns first hit, I immediately kind of had a little mini panic for all the juniors. I was like, oh my goodness, how are they gonna learn and grow? I mean, in terms of that, is it okay for you? Are there things in place at work that make those interactions possible, or are there like structures in place that help you carry on growing?
I would say definitely yes. At least in the position that, I can only speak for myself. It's nice to, what's really special actually about here at Salesforce is that when you do onboard, you're given a trail guide. And that person is like your buddy, your mentor, a person of contact that you can always constantly rely on and reach out to for anything. So usually this person is, either the next senior level, usually typically in like your company. Sorry, excuse me, on your team. Can I rephrase that? Usually this person is the next senior on your team. So this person is quite familiar with the onboarding process as they've, recently gone through it, usually within the last year or two, and they can really be someone who to show you the ropes. So when I first onboarded virtually, I would have, hours, get to spend hours with this person just solely on work that's, related to onboarding, getting familiar with the different terms and tech stacks and things like that, different products and objectives that the team's working on. So I thought that was really special that, we did have this, when I, as an intern, I did have this trail guide person. But, I think our interactions were more limited. But I don't know, actually, interestingly, virtually, I definitely spent more time with my trail guide. And this person is someone that you can constantly, not harass, but annoy with any of your questions. And, they'll be able to help you. And that's part of their role as a trail guide. So it's a really interesting structure. And, I'm looking forward to the day where I can be a trail guide for someone else. So I think that kind of culture, again, about like giving back and supporting one another is kind of a self-fulfilling loop and cycle.
That's fantastic. I think you'll make a fantastic trail guide. Maybe
Okay.
your future guidee is listening or watching this right now. Do you think when the lockdowns and the restrictions ease that you'll be expected to shift across the country, move over to the West Coast and go into the office every day or X number of days a week?
Yeah, so in like the recent announcement that is publicly available, we are able to Salesforce employees, we have a kind of a flex work status. So what that typically means is that most folks who don't need to come into the office every day, again, I would say those that do need to come in the office every day are maybe mainly like salespeople who are on a bunch of calls or take meetings at the office with people outside external to the company. Those people would have to still go into the office every day. But for the majority of folks, they're kind of in this flex category. They can come to the office at most 3 times a week. So I see myself for the most part still, working from home. But if I need to have any sort of like design sessions or, excuse me, any like critical conversations, perhaps then I could go into the office and have those. But I think for the most part, I'll still be, working remotely, working from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do
So
you
there's no
plan to?
expectation. Yeah, yeah. To answer like that question, I guess there's not really right now an expectation to move, but for my own like personal development, I can see myself, shifting out there. What's interesting though, I think after, the the pandemic, um, I think that tech hubs and tech culture is going to be quite spread out here in the US. So there's not necessarily like the lo and behold shining Silicon Valley anymore. I think it's going to be hubs across the country. You look at cities like Austin in Texas, or here even Atlanta, Georgia. I think those are going to be booming places for companies to move into. One, because it's cheap, and two, because there's great talent here at the universities and the industry overall. These cities are doing big. But I think it's also going to just help the spread of technology, jobs in technology across the country. So it's not necessarily going to be, the San Francisco Bay Area that I think companies will grow in. I think that they'll be able to grow honestly from anywhere, I think, after the pandemic.
That would be a great outcome, I guess, of this whole situation.
Mm.
So, I have an interesting question for you. Have you encountered software bootcamp graduates at all in your life or in your workplace?
Absolutely, I have. And I have to say that, it comes almost as a shock to me that these people come from, boot camps. And I say that because they have such an amazing outlook and an amazing spirit when it comes to working in technology. And it really is special to see folks come from all different backgrounds, having all different types of early career moves, but to ultimately land in technology. There's something about the combination of, experiences that they've had that really kind of jump starts, from my understanding, like their careers here in technology. I think that's very special, and it does like I cannot emphasize more how much of a shock it comes to me, because these people who come from, boot camps, they're able to catch on, not only catch on but also contribute fairly quickly to the company. And all the boot camp graduates that I've interfaced with are in senior or higher positions. So again, like, it really does come as a shock to me, and it does prove that I think having a traditional 4-year undergraduate degree, not to, of course, undermine myself, but I think that is just one path of many one can take into technology.
Mm.
It's not the golden path by any means. It's not the only path by any means. It's just one path. So I think when it comes to, celebrating the diversity that we have in technology, it should also come from a point of education and experience, and not just like who you are, who, what you look like, but also where you come from, and what type of experiences you have.
And of course, I mean, all these non-traditional paths are helping non-traditional people, start to gain more representation in our industry, right?
Absolutely. I think it's very critical that, I'm very I can't emphasize this enough. Like, I'm someone who really thinks technology is, almost, it takes a village to raise a child. And I think it takes a different diverse set of engineers and people to create this amazing technology. So we are, the technology definitely is a product of all of our shared combined experiences and knowledges. And the more diverse that gets, the more accessible and impactful this technology will be. So I'm very, I can talk, for hours about how important that is.
You've had a lot of involvement with women in tech initiatives at your university. I know you were involved there, and you are, of course, as we said, a woman in tech yourself. And on my podcast, and like a lot of other people of my generation or in generations in between us, we talk a lot about women in tech. How do we get more women in tech? How do we get more diversity? And of course, it's a problem with society around the world. It's a problem in our industry. We're all trying to make things better, and we talk about it a lot. But what's your experience been? Is it in a good place now? Is it in a bad place? What sort of experiences have you had?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic question, and happy to talk about this. Again, I'm going to go back and cite how fortunate I am to be in the position where I am. Not because, oh, thank God someone hired another woman in tech, but more so, I'm here to thank the, pioneers, the women in technology who have taken, great steps and walked miles so that I could run, if that makes sense. So, it's very special to look at how far women have come in technology in a place that is, still to this day very male dominated. But I definitely am fortunate to have women ahead of me make those moves so that I am able to be in the position that where I am today, and where I can also make those moves for future women and girls in technology as well. So, I definitely am very fortunate to say I haven't had a negative experience aside from, of course, sometimes being the only woman in the room or the only woman on the team or the only woman contributing to this particular repository and things like that, code wise, technically wise. But, it is very encouraging to seeing that I'm just one of many women in technology. I think that is where I really like to take a step back and be like, you might be the only woman in this call or in this room right now, but you're not the only woman in technology. And I think that is, you know, telling of the progress that's been made. But no means does that mean, but by no means does that indicate that the work is done, the work is over. So I really like to do my part when it comes to mentoring other women in technology. So I'm a mentor for Rewriting the Code. I think that's an amazing organization. If anyone is free to be a mentor, I highly recommend it. To work with college or younger women in technology and really give them advice about career, about life. It was a very special relationship that I've had with my mentee. I think that was still to this day I talk to her regularly, and I think that's very impactful and special. So it really does, got to take things one relationship at a time, one conversation at a time when it comes to adding more representation and diversity here with women in tech. And I think it's also very notable to look at companies who have inclusive and diverse hiring practices. So it tells just a lot about the company based on not only their statistics, but what are their trends over time. How have they been making up for the big gap of women in technology? So looking into things like that, I think, and celebrating that is very, very notable. But I will say that what's really special, I kind of keep going back to why Salesforce feels like home, is that when I was an intern, my manager, my trail guide, and my team lead, they were all women engineers. And that was, very special for me to see. And I was definitely in a place where I felt very empowered. And, in those times, I wasn't the only woman on a call or in the room. And I think that, that's the kind of the North Star, if you will, that, we see more equality happening in those conversations of building technology, of building the next greatest, product. I think that's all very meaningful. And it's honestly, I feel, just a matter of time before that gap gets closed. But that doesn't mean that we can sit back and hit just cruise. We definitely have to, go hard at making these initiatives, making those numbers happen.
It's wonderful to hear that your experiences have been positive and there's so much wonderful opportunities for you. And I echo what you say. Things are moving in the right direction, and we can't be complacent about it. We've got to keep things moving.
Yes.
And it's, of course, not only about women, it's about diverse people from all backgrounds and all walks of life, right? As you say yourself.
Absolutely.
So finally, tell me about your podcast. This is a pretty interesting one. I really love the theme you have going.
Thank you for giving it a shout out. This podcast has been a project in the making for some time, and I definitely have lots and lots of room for improvement on it and with it. But the basic gist of it is having conversations and shedding some light on topics that really combine humanity and technology. So I kind of like to think of it as a nice Black Mirror esque podcast, where I do talk about a lot of technologies and the impacts that they're having. So I've talked a bit about algorithmic bias and election technology, specifically here in the US, and having conversations I'm actually having a sub series of health and technology. So having explored all these different areas and territories of technology and how they've brought us together, how they've lifted us up, but also how they're starting or have been dividing us. I think that's also important to note. I'm not calling out specific technologies, but when it comes to like the dark side, I think there's just overarching themes in technology that we should be aware of and conscious of, minimizing when it comes to putting that net good out in the world. So I'm excited to see where this podcast grows, and it's very exciting to work with up and coming podcasters like yourself. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity for giving this shout out, and definitely shameless plug here, but definitely go check it out. It's on all platforms. It's called Cut the Code.
And it's very good. I really loved the last episode that you did, which was around health tech. And I like your angle, the kind of the Black Mirror approach, and the crossover with humanity and tech. I just think you need to do more of them. I think they're really interesting and they're really well.
No, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I definitely have some in the works. It's again getting back to that balance of just being a bit more proactive with that project. I definitely want to take it to the next level one day, if not sooner than later. So just having more and more like conversations and just investing more of my time there. It's I've just heard great feedback, and definitely want to keep that going.
So that's cut the code. People should definitely check that out. And do you have a Twitter or Instagram people can follow you on?
Yeah, I do have a Twitter. It's my first and last name, Nikita Rajput _. You can follow me on Twitter. I don't have an Instagram. That's where I differ myself from other people in my generation. I should probably do an episode of why I think like Instagram is a bit toxic, but Twitter is not as toxic. I mean, it can be, but I think Twitter, there's a lot of awesome content, and just I've learned so much on the platform. So I'm very interested in platforms where I can learn things like Twitter and Reddit. But of course, you got to take things, you got to do research behind of like what you're reading. I think that's also really important. So that's why I try to stay away from Instagram and Facebook for the most part.
That will be an interesting one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Instagram and Facebook. Nikita, thank you very much for your time. This has been amazing. Thanks for your fabulous insights and taking us along your journey.
Thanks so much, Sanj, for giving me this platform to speak. And I wish you the best. Wish this podcast the best. And I can't wait to hear your future episodes.
And that's all, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. For more info, for questions, comments, or feedback, please head on over to aheadintech.com and don't forget to subscribe.